Okay. Call you guys. Go ahead.
All right, so this morning we get to talk about one of the most complicated topics of all time, internet security and surveillance. What brought this up to me as a current event is a couple of things. The article that I mentioned in the other class about the cultural denial of internet security and nuclear power in the United States. And another thing that happened a couple days ago was the European Union voted whether to declare Edward Snowden, the guy that stole a bunch of information from the NSA, as a human rights activist instead of a criminal. On the article I read, that came out on October 29th, said that the EU voted at 285 to 281 to protect Edward and all European Union member states. So, needless to say, the United States government was not exactly pleased about that. But to go on, first I want to tackle internet security before I move on to any surveillance stuff. So, how many of you think the internet's safe? Aiden, kinda. Yeah, it's not. It's very not. How many of you use 8-character passwords? Don't tell me your password, just around 8 characters. You might want to change your password. I wrote some example passwords down. A lot of these are ones not to use. Actually, pretty much all of them except one. How many of you think this one's safe to use? Limp Biscuit Forever. If you can read it, sorry, Mike. No. To explain why, any password that can be if you use a password, anything that can be found in the dictionary or even spelt wrong, like using the word password but spelt wrong, it can actually be easily hacked, for lack of a better term. Any hacker using a sophisticated enough computer can have that password in less than a second. So people like my brother, who's a network security administrator, who's a guy that essentially fights hackers, if he wanted to get into your Facebook account that's using an 8-character password or less that's found in a general dictionary, he could. And screw you up. Most people won't, because you're college students. Who is going to go after you? Really? If they're going to try to get into your bank account or anything, they're not going to find anything. Any of you that is using a birth date as a password, just don't. Please. That is the worst idea ever. The only password up here that I wrote down as a good example is Robert Downey Jr. is awesome. And that's just a very generic example. When you're thinking of passwords, think of passphrases instead of using words. Using a certain phrase, even if you do a combination of significant characters, capitalization, anything, it just makes it a lot harder for anyone to access any of your information on the internet. Passphrase essentially increases the probability of them not getting in, because of the amount of characters that there are and the amount of any other significant characters and capitalizations that it actually has to scan through to go through. But anyway, that's that. So yeah, right now, be okay, or later on after the speech, go change your passwords. Be the best idea. Let's see, do I have anything else on password protection? No. Okay, so a quick blurb on that. Then moving on to government surveillance. Now, I talked about with internet security and government surveillance, it's a lot easier. You think how any hacker could get into your account to get any of your personal information. Thanks to you guys, by hitting that little agree button on everything, the government doesn't even need to do that to get your information. They like to collect all your little bits of information out of all the metadata and cookies that are stored on your computer. To define metadata, to take Snowden's Twitter post from the other day, he defines metadata as activity records, so anything that you do on the computer, anything that you Google search, anything that you type into your URL bar is stored and transferred. The NSA
in America is really notable for this because of Edward Snowden's actions. He revealed all the security information. Tried to look into what Canada does with that, and believe it or not, I couldn't really find anything because it's an intelligence service. They don't exactly release that information. But for Canada, you have to look at the government group CSEC, the Security and Canadian Security and Establishment. CSIS is the other intelligence branch. They're more like Canada's CIA. They don't really deal with the internet side of things. But they'll pull all your data off, cookies, metadata, and whatnot, and store it on servers. So to give you a good example of that would be, how many of you made an embarrassing Facebook post, Twitter post, taken a picture that ended up on Facebook that you thought was terrible? Yeah, most people. I'm guilty of that too. Government has that picture now. Doesn't matter whether you put it up on like Instagram or anything. The government, since all those programs are like, companies are based in the States, any information that, speaking from the States because it's the only information I really have on it because of all the leaked documentation, any information that it goes across the border of the United States and going into the United States is snagged by the NSA. So even if you're posting something on a Canadian website that's a company within Canada that does deal with Canada, they might have servers outside of Canada that without your knowledge they can transfer packets of data, it could be your information, it could be your friend's information, overseas, and the government grabs that. And it could only be temporarily moved, it could only be moved for a couple of seconds and then back, and government has that information now because it crossed the threshold, it crossed the border of our country, and they can do that. They don't need your permission because you hit the I agree button. All the companies that willingly give their information work side by side with the security agencies behind your back to release this personal information. Google is probably one of the biggest ones. Facebook, as you've seen in the video that we watched the other day, these are some of the biggest companies that do that. Another example of how dangerous the internet is. How many of you, I think it happened this summer, heard of the Twitter bombing that happened in the Middle East? One ISIS member or leader made a tweet on Twitter. The Canadian government got a hold of it, sent it to the Air Force, tracked their IP, and dropped a 2,000-pound bomb on them. So if you think they don't have your IP, think again, they do. So yeah, like I said, CSEC is the data collection agency. They deal with all the internet-related material. Unlike the United States, it is a lot more heavily regulated in Canada. Thanks to Bill C-51, whatever your views on it, it actually made it a lot easier for CSEC to grab information off the internet. To escape all the jargon within the bill, it essentially allows them to do what the NSA does, except they monitor and can only, to only grab specific packets of information, they still need a warrant. They still need to contact the owner of the information and deliver a judge-signed warrant to steal any specific amounts of data. There's been a lot of widespread controversy. This June, they wanted to, in the United States, they wanted to revise the Patriot Act regarding a bunch of the sections in it that were really broadly stated. One of the sections in that Patriot Act was called Section 215, which essentially, it's a very broad statement saying the government can take any tangible things related to acts of terrorism. It was written broadly, and it was very much meant to read broadly. So when they brought all this information up a couple of months ago to revise the bill, the principal author came up and spoke and I quote, "No fair reading of the text would allow for this type of program, speaking to the NSA's bulk collection of data." Okay. So there's a lot of widespread controversy. It is, internet security and government surveillance is always a hot button issue. It always should be, even though it's a concept that is fundamentally hard to understand. I suggest that you guys think about what you do on the internet before you do anything on the internet, just for your safety, or at least be able to start talking, bringing up this stuff, saying that, at least in my opinion, internet privacy should be protected a little bit better than, being able to track my Google searches on cats. But yeah, that's all I got. Hope you enjoyed it.